Before you scroll away, before you tell yourself this is just another message, listen carefully, because what happened this morning was not ordinary. You may have brushed it off. You may have ignored it. You may not even realize what you did. But heaven noticed. God noticed. And right now, at this very moment, there is a reason you are hearing these words. This is not an accident. This is not coincidence. This is not luck. God is saying, "My child, you did something unbelievable this morning, and because of it, a shift has already begun." Hear this clearly. The enemy wanted you to quit. The enemy wanted you to stay trapped in disappointment. The enemy wanted your faith to die in silence. But somehow, after everything you have been through, after the betrayals, after the heartbreak, after the loneliness, after the tears nobody saw, you got up again, you kept moving, you kept believing. And that simple act, that decision to keep going, shook the spiritual world more than you realize. Most people have no idea how much strength it takes to survive what you survived. Most people see your smile, but they never see the battles. They never see the prayers whispered into a pillow. They never see the nights you begged God for answers. They never see the moments when your heart was breaking while you were still trying to encourage everyone else. But God saw it all, every tear, every disappointment, every lonely moment, every silent cry. God is saying, "I saw what nobody else saw." And this morning you did something unbelievable. You refused to surrender. You refused to let darkness win. You refused to become bitter. You refused to stop believing. And because of that, something is changing. Something is moving. Something is being prepared. The season you are entering is not like the season you are leaving. Listen carefully, because this message may explain everything. Everything that confused you. Everything that hurt you. Everything that seemed delayed. Everything that felt unfair. God wants you to hear this today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because your breakthrough is closer than it appears. And the signs have already begun. Chosen one, there is something different about you. You have felt it your entire life. You never quite fit in. You never fully belonged. Even in crowded rooms, you felt alone. Even around people, you felt different. You tried to understand why. You tried to blend in. You tried to become what others expected. But no matter how hard you tried, you always felt separate. There is a reason. God separated you before He elevated you. Hear this clearly. What feels like rejection is often divine protection. What feels like isolation is often preparation. And what feels like abandonment is often God creating space for your destiny. The people around you could not understand what was happening, because they could not see what heaven was building. While others were chasing approval, God was building character. While others were seeking attention, God was strengthening your spirit. While others were celebrating temporary victories, God was preparing eternal purpose. And that preparation was painful, very painful. You lost people you thought would stay forever. You trusted people who betrayed you. You loved people who walked away. You helped people who later criticized you. You stood beside people who abandoned you when you needed them most. The pain was real. The wounds were real. The heartbreak was real. But hear this carefully. Nothing was wasted, not one tear, not one disappointment, not one lonely night. God used every painful moment as training. Every betrayal taught discernment. Every heartbreak taught wisdom. Every rejection taught dependence on God. Every delay built endurance. Every closed door redirected your steps. God is saying, I was preparing you while you thought I was ignoring you. And that is why this morning mattered. Because, despite everything, you still chose faith. You still chose hope. You still chose to trust. The enemy cannot understand that. The enemy expected you to collapse, expected you to quit, expected you to become angry, expected you to abandon your purpose. But you did not. You are still standing, and that terrifies darkness. Listen carefully. The strongest people are not those who never suffer. The strongest people are those who keep believing after suffering. That is you. You have survived battles that would have destroyed others. You have walked through valleys nobody knows about. You have carried burdens silently. You have fought spiritual warfare behind closed doors. And through it all, God was watching, God was strengthening, God was preparing. There were moments when heaven felt silent, moments when prayers seemed unanswered, moments when nothing made sense, moments when you wondered if God had forgotten you. But God never left, not once, even when you could not feel Him, even when you could not see Him, even when you were crying, even when you were doubting, even when you were exhausted. He was there, working behind the scenes, moving pieces into place, removing wrong people, opening future doors, arranging divine connections, protecting you from dangers you never saw. God is saying, the silence was not absence. The silence was preparation. And now, you are beginning to see signs, small signs, unexpected signs, moments that seem impossible to explain. Doors opening suddenly, people appearing unexpectedly, old burdens falling away, new opportunities emerging, a deeper sense of peace, a stronger sense of purpose, a growing awareness that something is changing, because something is changing. Transformation always comes before elevation. Remember that. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly overnight. There is a hidden process, a painful process, a lonely process, a process nobody applauds, a process nobody understands. But that process creates the wings. And God is saying, the process you hated is producing the person you prayed to become. Hear this clearly. The version of you entering the next season is stronger than the version that entered the last one. You have greater discernment, greater wisdom, greater faith, greater endurance, greater spiritual awareness. The attacks were not proof of weakness. The attacks were proof of significance. Darkness attacks what threatens it. And your destiny threatens darkness. That is why the warfare intensified. That is why confusion increased. That is why distractions appeared. That is why fake relationships surrounded you. The enemy was trying to delay what God already decided. But hear this carefully. Nobody can cancel what God has ordained. Nobody. Not critics, not enemies, not betrayal, not delays, not mistakes, not fear, not opposition. If God has spoken it, it will happen. And right now, the pieces are moving, the preparation is ending, the breakthrough is approaching. The waiting season is teaching its final lessons. The storm is losing power, the darkness is weakening, the morning is coming. God is saying, my child, I did not bring you this far to leave you here. The tears were not the end, the heartbreak was not the end, the loneliness was not the end, the confusion was not the end, the silence was not the end, the story is not over. In fact, the most powerful chapter is about to begin, and when it happens, you will understand why the journey was necessary. You will understand why certain people left. You will understand why certain doors closed. You will understand why certain dreams were delayed. You will understand why God said no when you begged for yes, because His plan was bigger, better, wiser, stronger. and closer than you think. Listen carefully. This is your confirmation. The struggle was preparation, the waiting was preparation, the heartbreak was preparation, the isolation was preparation, the silence was preparation. Everything was preparation. And now heaven is whispering, stay faithful a little longer. Because what God is building cannot be stopped. What God is preparing cannot be stolen. What God has promised cannot be destroyed. Your breakthrough is coming, your healing is coming, your restoration is coming, your victory is coming. And this morning, without even realizing it, you took another step toward it. That step mattered. Heaven saw it. God saw it. And the next season of your life is already beginning. Listen carefully, because this part may explain the pain you have been carrying. It may explain the loneliness. It may explain the confusion. It may explain why certain people suddenly changed, why certain relationships collapsed, why certain doors closed, why certain conversations ended, why certain people disappeared without explanation. You thought it was punishment. You thought it was failure. You thought something was wrong with you. But God is saying, my child, I was protecting your future. Hear this clearly. Not everyone assigned to your past is qualified for your future. Not everyone who started the journey with you can finish it with you. Some people were only meant for a season. Some people were only meant for a lesson. Some people were only meant to reveal what was hidden. And when their purpose was complete, God removed them. That hurt. It hurt more than words can explain, because you cared, you invested, you trusted, you believed, you hoped things would be different. But heaven saw what you could not see. God saw the conversations behind your back. God saw the hidden motives. God saw the jealousy. God saw the manipulation. God saw the masks. And while you were trying to save the relationship, God was trying to save you. Listen carefully. One of the hardest things for a chosen person to accept is this. Sometimes the people you prayed would stay are the very people God needs to remove, because destiny requires separation, elevation requires purification, purpose requires clarity, and clarity often comes through loss. The painful truth is that some people only loved the version of you that needed them. They celebrated you when you were weak. They supported you when you were small. But the moment God started growing you, the moment your confidence increased, the moment your discernment sharpened, the moment your calling became visible, their attitude changed. Suddenly they became distant. Suddenly they became critical. Suddenly they became uncomfortable. Why? Because your growth exposed their stagnation. Your light exposed their darkness. Your purpose revealed their insecurity. Hear this clearly. Not everyone can celebrate a blessing they secretly wish belonged to them. That is why God is separating things, not to hurt you, to protect you, to prepare you, to position you. Because where you are going requires a different environment, a different mindset, a different circle, a different atmosphere. God is saying, I cannot place new wine into old containers. And that is why this season has felt strange. You have outgrown places that once felt comfortable. You have outgrown conversations that once entertained you. You have outgrown relationships that once seemed important. You have outgrown old fears, old habits, old limitations. You are changing, and change is uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Because growth demands that you leave behind versions of yourself that once felt familiar. The loneliness you feel right now is not permanent. It is transitional. God often creates space before he sends alignment. He removes distractions before he releases direction. He clears the field before he plants the harvest. That empty feeling, that silence, that distance, it may actually be evidence that heaven is making room for the right people, making room for divine opportunities, making room for answered prayers, making room for the life you have been believing for. Hear this clearly. The enemy wants you to misinterpret this season. He wants you to think you are forgotten, abandoned, defeated, behind, but God is saying, you are being positioned. There is a difference, a huge difference, because forgotten people drift, positioned people prepare, forgotten people lose direction. Positioned people gain clarity, forgotten people have no purpose. Positioned people are being trained for purpose, and right now, God is training you. The battles were training. The disappointments were training. The delays were training. The heartbreak was training. The waiting was training. The silence was training. Everything was training. You asked God for strength. He allowed resistance. You asked God for wisdom. He allowed challenges. You asked God for purpose. He allowed preparation. Because strength is not learned in comfort. Wisdom is not learned in ease. Purpose is not discovered in convenience. The greatest transformations happen in hidden places. That is why your story has been hidden. That is why your process has been hidden. That is why your preparation has been hidden. God does his deepest work where applause cannot reach. And now, something is shifting. Can you feel it? That restlessness, that awareness, that sense that something is about to happen. You cannot fully explain it. But you know deep inside, you know the old season is ending, the old version of you is ending, the old limitations are ending, the old cycle is ending. God is saying, the season of surviving is becoming the season of rising. Before every major breakthrough, there is often intense pressure. Before every sunrise, there is darkness. Before every promotion, there is testing. Before every victory, there is resistance. Do not panic because the battle became difficult. The battle becoming difficult may be evidence that you are close, very close. Closer than you think. The enemy attacks hardest when he knows his time is running out. That sudden discouragement, that unexpected conflict, that strange heaviness, those waves of doubt, those moments of fear, do not be surprised. Spiritual warfare often intensifies before spiritual breakthrough. But hear this clearly. You are not fighting for victory. You are fighting from victory. God is already ahead of you, already preparing the way, already opening doors, already arranging connections, already making a path